My name's Eli. I've always been a bit of a loner, not in a weird way, I just enjoy my space. Back in March, I finally bought my first house. I've been saving for years, and I wanted something far from the city. I work remotely doing back-end software development, so location doesn't really matter, and the idea of living on a quiet wooded property always appealed to me. Eventually, I found a modest house tucked away in northern Michigan. It was one of those motivated seller deals, so the price was way under market. It needed some cosmetic work, but nothing major. Secluded, decent land, no neighbors in sight, pretty much my dream setup. I moved in the first week of April. The place had clearly been sitting vacant for a while. The grass out front was knee-high. There was mail jammed in the rusted box, and a couple of dead leaves were still stuck inside the porch light. But I didn't mind. It gave me something to fix. The house itself was quiet, surprisingly quiet, and not in a peaceful, serene way. More like the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're not supposed to be there. I chalked it up to the isolation and the fact that I was adjusting to a new place. But there was one thing I noticed early on that never sat right with me. In the narrow hallway closet, just outside the main bedroom, there was a square cut into the floor, a little crawlspace panel, probably 3 feet wide, made of plywood and covered with a thin, peeling rug. I didn't think much of it at first. Most older homes had crawl spaces, right? The thing that bothered me, though, was that the panel had no handle, no hinge, no way to open it easily, just a square, flush with the floor, as if someone really didn't want it being opened. Still, I left it alone. The first couple of weeks were uneventful. I spent most of my time fixing small things, patching drywall, repainting trim, clearing branches off the roof, basic stuff. But around the third week, things started happening that I couldn't easily explain. It started small. At night, I'd hear tapping on the walls, not like creaks or settling noises, more like deliberate, rhythmic tapping, always 3 knocks, sometimes 4, but always spaced out, like someone testing something. I even heard it once while I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth. It came from the hallway just outside the door. I froze, toothbrush hanging out of my mouth, and just listened. Then, 3 knocks, slow and steady. I opened the door, expecting to see, I don't even know what. But there was nothing. I started sleeping with a flashlight next to my bed. One night, this would have been early May, I was up late, watching YouTube in the living room. The rest of the house was dark. At around 2:30 a.m., I got up to use the bathroom, and as I passed the hallway, I saw that the closet door was slightly open. Now, I never leave that door open. It stays closed, always. I made a mental note to check it in the morning and went to bed, but the next morning, when I went to close it, I noticed the crawl space panel had shifted. It wasn't flush with the floor anymore. One corner was sticking up. I stared at it for a long time before kneeling down. My first thought was that maybe something underneath had expanded with the weather, but when I pulled the rug aside, I saw scratch marks on the wood itself. Deep, uneven scratches, like someone had tried to pry it open from beneath. I stood up, backed out of the closet, and shut the door without touching it again. I didn't sleep that night. That week, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, just leftover anxiety from moving. I even invited my cousin Derek to stay the weekend, just to have another person in the house. Saturday night, we stayed up late drinking and playing cards. At one point, Derek got up to use the bathroom. After a few minutes, he came back into the living room and asked if I'd been messing with him. I said no, obviously. He looked weirded out and said, "I swear to God, dude, someone just knocked on the hallway wall while I was in there, like right outside the door." I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my flashlight and showed him the closet. We stared at that square panel for a solid minute. Derek laughed and said, "Nah, screw that," and went back to the living room. Later that night, Around 3:15, I woke up to the sound of something moving in the hallway. Not footsteps exactly, more like something dragging lightly across the floor. I sat up and listened. My heart was pounding. Then, 3 knocks, right outside my bedroom door. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Eventually, the sound stopped. I stayed awake until sunrise. The next morning, Derek was gone. No note, no text. He didn't answer his phone until that evening. When he finally called me back, he just said, "Hey man, no offense, but I'm not coming back there. Something's wrong with that house. I don't even want to talk about it." Then he hung up. I didn't press him. That was when I decided to open the crawl space. It was a Sunday afternoon, full daylight. I pulled back the rug, got a pry bar, and forced the panel open. It was heavier than I expected, almost like something was pushing back. Underneath was a narrow wooden ladder leading down into a dirt chamber. Not a basement, just a dugout void, maybe 5 feet high. The air that came out was wrong, damp, sour, and thick. I climbed down slowly, flashlight in hand. What I found still gives me chills. There were old children's toys, dusty, broken, half buried in the dirt, a small tricycle, a stuffed rabbit missing an eye, and a worn-out baby shoe, just one. In the far corner, propped against the wall, was a large photo frame, face down. I turned it over and saw a black and white portrait of a family of 4. Husband, wife, 2 young kids, but all of their faces had been scratched out, deep gouges right through the glass. Behind the frame was something even worse, a journal, just a few pages. The handwriting was frantic, almost illegible, but what I could read, it said, "He watches from under. Don't let the door open at night. Don't listen to the knocks. Don't answer them." I left everything where it was, climbed out, and nailed the panel shut. That night, I slept in my truck. I've been living out of hotels ever since. The house is still there, still in my name. But I won't go back, not until I figure out what that place really is. I've contacted the county to dig into old property records. So far, no luck. Every trace of the previous owners ends in 1998. I've since had cameras installed around the house, motion activated, battery powered. 3 nights ago, one of them picked up something. At 3:03 a.m., the camera facing the back deck recorded a shape, tall, thin, moving in a jerky, unnatural way. It stopped at the back door and tilted its head toward the lens. Then it knocked, 3 times, and walked away. I still have the footage. I'm not going back there. But something tells me it's already found me. This happened about 2 years ago, and to be honest, I still don't feel totally comfortable sharing it. I've never posted anything like this online before, but this has stayed with me. Maybe writing it out will help me make sense of it. At the time, my girlfriend Leah and I had just bought our first house together. It was an old colonial-style place tucked at the edge of a small town in northern Michigan. The kind of quiet town where everything closes by 9 p.m., and the only real noise you'll hear at night is the wind through the trees. We got a good deal on the house. Too good, probably. It had been sitting on the market for a while, but it checked all our boxes. Big yard, older charm, affordable. There were some quirks, of course. The upstairs hallway sloped slightly, some doors didn't shut quite right, and the basement had a weird, sour smell we could never quite get rid of. But nothing alarming. At least not at first. It started with the noises. We'd be sitting in the living room at night, watching TV, and we'd hear what sounded like footsteps upstairs. Not heavy, just slow, deliberate creaks on the old wooden floorboards. We wrote it off as the house settling. Old homes do that, right? Then the attic door started opening by itself. I wish I was exaggerating. It wasn't one of those pull-down ladders, just a small, square hatch in the ceiling at the end of the upstairs hallway. No way to accidentally bump into it, but somehow we kept finding it slightly ajar. At first, I thought maybe Leah had opened it while I was at work, trying to store something up there. But when I asked her, she said she hadn't touched it. In fact, she looked genuinely freaked out when I mentioned it. I climbed up to check it out and found nothing, just insulation, cobwebs, and a bunch of old junk left behind by the previous owners. No animals, no weird signs of entry. Still, I latched it shut tight. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing faint thuds from the ceiling, like something was shifting up there. The next morning, Leah woke me up before work. Her face was pale. "There's dirt in the kitchen," she said. She wasn't wrong. There were muddy footprints, bare feet by the look of it, tracked from the back door to the middle of the kitchen floor. Then they just stopped. The door was locked. All the windows were shut. We don't have pets, and neither of us had gone outside barefoot. We called the police. They did a quick walkthrough, checked the locks, and told us there was no sign of forced entry. "Probably a prank," they said. "Maybe kids snuck in and messed with us." We changed the locks that same day. I even bought one of those cheap motion sensor cameras and set it up in the hallway, pointing toward the attic. That night, I couldn't relax. I kept watching the live camera feed on my phone. Hours went by. Nothing. But just past 3 a.m., I saw it. The attic door creaked open, slowly. I couldn't see what opened it, just the hatch easing downward. The camera's infrared light casting a pale glow over the hallway. I sat up in bed, heart hammering, watching as the door hung open for a few seconds, and then closed, not slammed, just slowly pushed shut again. I bolted out of bed and ran into the hallway, but of course, there was nothing. Leah came out after me, asking what was wrong. I didn't want to scare her too badly, so I just said, "I thought I heard something." But my hands were shaking. The next morning, I checked the camera footage. It was gone. Just a black screen during those minutes. The files before and after were intact, but the part I know I saw, just deleted. I don't know if that's even possible, but it happened. Then came the scratching. It started faint, barely noticeable, but over the next week, it got louder, more frequent, always at night, always from the walls or ceiling. Sometimes it sounded like it was coming from inside the vents, like nails, dragging. One night, Leah swore she heard whispering through the floorboards. We both lay there in the dark, holding each other, too afraid to move. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe we were psyching ourselves out. Maybe we were just stressed from the move. But then one night, I saw someone. It was about 2 a.m. I'd gotten up to get water. As I was passing the staircase, I saw a shadow move, fast, at the top of the stairs. Just a glimpse, but it was enough. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I stared up into the dark, my heart thudding so hard it hurt. I waited. Nothing. When I finally went back to bed, I kept that knife from the kitchen under my pillow. I didn't even care how paranoid that was. The next morning, Leah told me she'd had a nightmare, said someone was standing over her while she slept, just watching. She didn't tell me right away, though, not until she found a handprint on the bedroom window, from the inside. That's when I told her everything. We were both scared, but neither of us wanted to leave. We'd put every cent we had into this place. It was supposed to be our future. The last straw came a few nights later. We woke up to the sound of banging, loud, relentless banging, from somewhere deep inside the house. It echoed through the walls like a jackhammer. I grabbed a flashlight and ran down to the basement, thinking maybe something had collapsed, and that's when I saw it. The far corner of the basement wall had crumbled inward, revealing a narrow crawl space I'd never seen before. Inside was a small wooden chair, and sitting in that chair was a pile of what looked like children's clothes. Old, rotted, covered in dust. Next to the chair, carved into the wall, were 4 words: "Stay quiet, he listens." We left the next morning, packed what we could, and got out. We ended up selling the house at a loss. I didn't care. I didn't even want to look at the place again. To this day, I don't know who or what was in that house with us, but whatever it was, it never wanted us there. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I still check the attic door in our new house, just to be sure. When my wife and I bought our new home, we thought it was going to be the fresh start we needed. We'd been living in a cramped apartment for years. Paper-thin walls, neighbors constantly yelling, parking nightmares, the works. This house wasn't anything fancy. It was a little dated, and the previous owners hadn't really taken great care of it, but it had a big backyard and plenty of space inside. Best part? It backed up against a stretch of woods, which meant peace and quiet, total privacy, or so we thought. I work from home as a graphic designer, so I spend a lot of time in the house, especially during the day. My wife, Erin, works long shifts at the hospital, so I'm usually by myself until late in the evening. I didn't mind. I liked the stillness. The only sounds were the occasional bird call or the wind rustling through the trees behind us. It was exactly what I thought I'd needed. The first few weeks were uneventful. We were settling in, unpacking boxes, making the place our own. The only thing that bothered me was how dark the backyard got at night. With the trees pressed right up to the fence line, it felt like the woods swallowed all the light. Sometimes, I'd catch myself staring out the sliding glass doors, feeling like someone, or something, was out there, just beyond the reach of the porch light. But I chalked it up to my imagination. Moving is stressful, and our minds play tricks when we're adjusting to a new space. It wasn't until the second month that things started getting weird. One afternoon, while Erin was at work, I went out back to clean up some fallen branches after a storm had rolled through. As I made my way toward the corner of the yard, I noticed something odd on the back fence, like scratch marks. Long, uneven, almost frantic looking. They weren't from an animal. They were too high up, and there were too many of them, clustered together in one spot like someone, or something, had been clawing to get in, or out. I asked Erin about it that night, but she shrugged it off, said it was probably just some old marks I hadn't noticed before. The next night, I was up late, working in my office, which faces the backyard. Around 1 a.m., I looked up from my screen and noticed the motion sensor light had come on. I figured it was a raccoon or a deer, but I still got up to check. I leaned toward the window and stared out into the yard. At first, I didn't see anything, but just as I was about to walk away, I caught a glimpse of something at the tree line. A person, standing completely still, just at the edge of the woods. I froze. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light, but the longer I stared, the more I could make out the shape. Definitely a person. They weren't moving, just standing there, facing the house. I couldn't see their face, and they were partially blocked by a tree, but something about their posture sent a chill through me. Like they weren't just there, they were waiting. I must have stood at that window for 5 straight minutes, trying to convince myself it was a stump, or a shadow, or something explainable. Eventually, I pulled the curtain shut and sat back down, but I didn't get much work done after that. When I told Erin the next morning, she tried to laugh it off but could tell I was rattled. She offered to install a security camera just to make me feel better. So we did, but that didn't help, because whoever it was, they came back. The camera only recorded motion clips, and 2 nights later, I got a notification at 2:13 a.m. When I opened the app, my stomach dropped. There was someone walking along the back fence. They weren't trying to break in. They weren't vandalizing anything. They were just pacing, slowly, from one end of the fence to the other. Then, They stopped right in front of the camera and stood there for what felt like forever. The night vision caught enough detail to see that they were barefoot, and their clothes were torn and filthy. But the most disturbing part, their head was tilted at this unnatural angle, like it was too heavy for their neck to support. I showed the footage to the police. They sent a patrol car out to check the woods, but didn't find anyone. They told us to keep the camera running and let them know if anything else happened. Erin was on edge. She started coming home earlier. We kept all the blinds shut and made sure the doors were locked, even during the day. A few days passed with nothing. I started to think maybe it had been a transient or someone passing through. Maybe they'd moved on. But then we started hearing the knocking. It started on the back wall of the house, just after midnight. Soft, rhythmic knocks, like someone was dragging their knuckles across the siding. I checked the camera, but nothing showed up. Erin and I stayed in bed, wide-eyed, listening to it move slowly from one end of the house to the other. It stopped after a few minutes. We barely slept. The next morning, I went outside and found a small handprint on the glass of the back door. But it wasn't a normal handprint. The fingers were too long, almost like whoever left it had extra joints. I wanted to believe it was a smudge, but deep down, I knew better. That night, we packed a bag and stayed at a hotel, just to get away, just to reset. But when we came back 2 days later, the house felt different, like it had been waiting for us. There were muddy footprints in the kitchen, leading from the back door to the stairs, but the door had still been locked when we returned. No signs of a break-in, nothing stolen, just tracks, human tracks, inside our home. We moved out a week later. We didn't even bother to sell the place. We broke the lease, took the loss, and left. I still don't know what we let in, or if it was already there when we moved. But whatever it was, it wanted us to see it.